Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer on chiral chromatography. I'm Dr. Chem, and today we are diving straight into the high-stakes science of separating molecular mirror images. This is a highly specialized area of analytical chemistry, and it is fundamentally what ensures the medications we rely on are actually safe and effective.
Here is our roadmap for today's masterclass. We'll start with the chiral challenge, then look at the principle of separation, our system components and procedure, the chiral stationary phases, advantages and limitations, and wrap up with real-world applications. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The chiral challenge. Identical properties, vastly different impacts.
So, to really grasp this challenge, we've got to look at the molecules themselves. We're talking about enantiomers. Basically, these are perfect, non-superimposable mirror images of each other. Think of your left and right hands, right? In a standard achiral environment, they act exactly the same. Same boiling point, same solubility, same density. But throw them into a biological system, which is inherently chiral itself, and they suddenly behave in radically different ways.
The stakes here, they're incredibly high. You see, one enantiomer of a racemic drug, which we call the eutomer, might perfectly bind to a receptor and cure disease. But its mirror image, the distomer, well, it could be totally inactive, or honestly, much worse. It could cause severe toxic side effects. It's crazy to think that a simple molecular reflection can literally mean the difference between a life-saving cure and a dangerous poison. And because of this, regulatory bodies like the FDA strictly mandate that pharmaceutical companies market only the active, safe enantiomer.
Moving on to Section 2, the principle of separation, or fitting the molecular glove.
So here's the million-dollar question. How on earth do we separate two molecules that share the exact same physical and chemical properties? I mean, if they boil at the same temp and dissolve in the same solvents, your standard separation techniques just aren't going to cut it. The trick is to create a temporary chiral environment. We use a direct separation method featuring a chiral stationary phase, or CSP for short. This phase is packed with optically active molecules that interact uniquely with each enantiomer. It's exactly like a glove that only fits a right hand perfectly. As the racemic mixture passes through, these temporary non-covalent diastereomeric complexes form. And because these complexes have slightly different interaction energies, one enantiomer gets held onto, or retained, just a bit longer than the other, which completely separates them as they flow out of the system. This process is perfectly captured by the Dalglish three-point interaction model, a totally foundational concept in chiral recognition. For a successful separation, you absolutely need at least 3 simultaneous interactions between the chiral selector and your target enantiomer. We're talking dipole stacking, hydrogen bonding, pi-pi interactions, or steric hindrance. Ultimately, only one of the enantiomers is going to have the precise 3D geometry to make all 3 connections perfectly, locking it in place for just a fraction of a second longer than its twin.
Section 3. Components and procedure. Let's look at the actual hardware of separation.
A typical lab setup is built around robust chromatography systems. High-performance liquid chromatography, or HPLC, is everywhere, along with GC and capillary electrophoresis. But lately, we're seeing a massive shift towards supercritical fluid chromatography, or SFC, which uses liquid carbon dioxide as the mobile phase. It's incredibly fast, high throughput, and honestly, a lot greener since it slashes organic solvent waste. But whatever system you use, you're going to need a specialized column packed with your CSP, a carefully chosen mobile phase, an ejector, and highly sensitive detectors. Think UV, mass specs, or advanced laser polarimeters to measure that optical rotation. The workflow itself is highly structured. First up, we equilibrate the system with our mobile phase. Next, we inject the racemic sample. As it travels, we let the CSP do its thing, selectively interacting with and retaining one enantiomer longer than the other. Finally, our detectors catch the separated molecules as they emerge, spitting them out as peaks on a chromatogram. From there, we meticulously analyze the data to calculate resolution and figure out the exact enantiomeric purity.
All right, Section 4, chiral stationary phases. This is really the chemist's toolkit.
The real magic is happening inside that column, and our choice of phase depends entirely on the analyte's chemistry. We've got a massive toolkit to pull from. Polysaccharide CSPs, derived from cellulose and amylose, are the undisputed heavyweights here. I mean, over 90% of HPLC methods for finding enantiomeric excess use them because of their broad-spectrum selectivity and huge loading capacity. But we've also got protein phases like BSA for electrostatic interactions, macrocyclic antibiotics like vancomycin, and ligand exchange phases that cleverly use transition metals like copper ions right at the core of their separation complex.
Take a look at the Welka-1 structure. This is what we call a Perkel type or brush type CSP. Perkel columns generally rely heavily on pi-pi bonding and hydrogen bonding, but the Welka-1 is particularly fascinating because it's a hybrid. It actually bears both pi-acidic electron acceptor sites and pi-basic electron donor sites. That dual nature is exactly what lets it separate a really vast, complex array of drug compounds with pinpoint precision.
On the flip side, we have cyclodextrin CSPs, and these operate on a totally different geometric principle. They essentially act like molecular traps. If you check out the bucket-like structures of the alpha, beta, and gamma cyclodextrins, you can clearly see how they physically capture specific enantiomers inside their structural cavities. It's all based on the highly specific shapes and sizes of the molecules, allowing them to form a reversible inclusion complex.
Section 5. Advantages and limitations. Time to balance the analytical scales.
Now, no analytical technique is perfect, so we have to balance things out here. The advantages are absolutely undeniable. This technique gives us unparalleled selectivity and is quite literally vital for ensuring drug safety and efficacy. It delivers the ultra-high sensitivity and reproducibility needed to meet those strict regulatory standards. But we've got to acknowledge the limitations. Chiral columns are notoriously expensive, and they don't last forever. Plus, since every single separation is a unique puzzle, finding the exact right combination of CSP and mobile phase takes extensive method development time, which obviously drives up operational costs.
Which brings us to Section 6, Real-World Applications, Impact Beyond the Laboratory. The applications of chiral chromatography go way beyond standard lab curiosities. It is literally the backbone of pharmaceutical development. It ensures regulatory compliance by proving a drug contains only the beneficial eutamer, whether we're talking about beta blockers, antidepressants, or antifungal agents. But it definitely doesn't stop there. This tech is actively used in forensic science, biotechnology, and even environmental monitoring, where tracking the breakdown of chiral pesticides is absolutely crucial for keeping our ecosystem safe.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. As our pharmaceutical medicines get infinitely more complex, utilizing larger and far more intricately folded molecules, how will chiral chromatography evolve to keep up? What new, unimagined chiral selectors are we going to need to design to keep pushing the boundaries of human safety? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the chemistry around you.